another player I can't stop drafting is Joe Burrow. And it took me a little bit like this offseason, and I've always been like, if anybody has followed me or listened to the show, I believe Joe Burrow is the second best NFL quarterback in the league. NFL quarterback. There's Mahomes, there's a teardrop, there's Joe Burrow, and I think there's a teardrop behind Joe Burrow because Burrow can beat Mahomes. Nobody else seems to be able to beat Mahomes. But like fantasy football, and Joe Burrow has dealt with a lot of injuries, but fantasy football, he had one, I would say two big, 2021 quarterback 10 fantasy points per game. But the big year was 2022, where it was a QB4 in fantasy points per game, played all 17 games. That was that outstanding run. Cincinnati looked like the next big thing. And then last year, the wheels came off with Joe Burrow. Everybody was banged up on the offense. Defense took a step back. So this year's edition of Joe Burrow, like I can't, and I make this mistake. I'm human, and I think a lot of us do. We see the injuries. We see, well, what's going on with Higgins? Now, Higgins, they're not coming up with a long-term deal. Today was a deadline. He signed his tag last month. He's there for this year. Jamar Chase, he gets a little bit banged up. Higgins gets a little bit banged up. They lost Boyd. They lost Joe Mixon. So there's a lot of losses here in Cincinnati. So why buy into Joe Burrow? Joe Burrow's cost right now is sinking. I'm seeing him slip, I believe, the latest FFPC ADP. I think he's going behind like Jordan Love. The more I dissect the loss of Joe Mixon, the more I like Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And injury aside, if these guys can stay healthy, I think this Cincinnati offense, they're going to throw the ball a lot. Last year, and this was a year where, like I said, Higgins a little bit banged up. Jamar Chase, I believe, missed some time. Joe Burrow missed a lot of time. They still threw they were 8th in NFL team pass attempts per game. They're throwing the football in the Zach Taylor offense. And if Joe Burrow is throwing the football this year, I think they could potentially be a top 3 team in pass attempts per game. Why is that? Running back position. Mixon, he might not be the sexiest guy in the world, not the sexiest NFL running back, but he was reliable. He could do it all. He was dependable. I am not sold on Zach Moss on being anything but an outlier with a very good team at running the football with the Colts last year. He got not a great deal. He didn't get starter money. He didn't get Tony Pollard money. He got like Austin Eckler money, less than Austin Eckler money, which is backup money in the NFL. Chase Brown is nice. He's more of a PPR guy. I don't see him as an every down back. So this running back room is very much questionable to me. And if they can't sustain a running game, a team that threw the 8th most times last year, it's only natural where they could be top 3. This defense, I don't believe is going to be better. I think the defense is going to take a step back. So all signs are pointing to, if the Cincinnati Bengals are going to win football games, it's going to be on Joe Burrow. And at his current cost, going right around QB 10 in the FFPC, I will gamble on that because, like I said, 2 years ago, he was a QB4 in fantasy points per game. We know he has it in him when he's healthy, and I'll bank on, barring some weird freak preseason injury again, like past couple years, it was the appendix. And then last year, it was the calf strain. And then it was a wrist ligament injury that took him out. Like, if we get a healthy Joe Burrow, I think he's one of the non-mobile quarterbacks that can finish inside the top 5.
Yeah, and we did a video prior to the draft and right around free agency, and I think me and Anthony, I think our mindsets shifted a little bit on Burrow. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that.
We are allowed to change our fucking minds, people. There's a difference, and this is the difference between, and you follow who you want, but like people who they plant their flags and they'll draft the guy year after year to blow up in their face because they want to be right so bad. This business, and I got this from Colin Cowherd. You have to change your mind. You have to pivot. And that is something I think all of us here at Face Off, on this show, we pivot according to what the players and the news tell us to do. So it is okay to be out on Joe Burrow before the draft and be like, hey, things are starting to look like Joe Burrow could be a nice value right now. We're allowed to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think they did a lot of things that surprised me, right? I mean, we've talked about the offensive line. I mean, last year pass blocking, this was the 22nd ranked offensive line in pass blocking. They made some changes. Trent Brown is there. They have Orlando Brown year 2 in this system. Trent Brown is not the same guy that he once was, and I know Joe Carlton's in here and he's a Pats fan, and he probably has a pretty firm opinion on Trent Brown, but he had some good years, and he's probably better than what they had last year. And they drafted Amarius Mims. This dude is a freak. I mean, 340 pounds, 6'8" tackle. I mean, the sky is the limit for Amarius Mims, and so if Joe Burrow can get more time in the pocket, I think he can definitely beat out this ADP. I mean, prior to, now a couple months ago, he was kind of at that like 6 range, and it was a little expensive for me, but as ADP has shifted, right, the average his ADP for quarterbacks is similar to where it was, but people are drafting him later. And at that point, I'm okay taking a shot. To Anthony's point, like, this team will probably throw the ball 5th most in the NFL. That defense stinks. It's not a good defense. Like, they're going to be in some shootouts. They play in a really good division, right? They play with the Browns, who should be better. If Watson takes that next step, and they're a playoff team almost last year. No, they were in the playoffs last year. Sorry. You have the Steelers, who are going to be fighting and scratching every single season. And you have the Ravens, who are Super Bowl contenders, right? And the Bengals, respectively, are probably contenders as well. So the loss of Mixon, I'm not a big believer in Zach Moss either. After those few blow-up weeks in the beginning of the season for the Colts, he really was not anything special. And I think he was a little inflated on his stats, on his yards per carry. And I think that's going to change in this offense. Chase Brown's more of a receiving back. He had some big splash plays, but I think Chase Brown's going to be a good safety valve, kind of similar to what Mixon was for this offense. And that kind of takes me to the Chase Brown and the Zach Moss argument. And we can talk about that at another time. But yeah, I like Joe Burrow. I mean, as long as he's healthy, he's going to be a top player in this league. And he was quarterback 4, in 2022. So not last year, the year prior. Quarterback to 10 the year before that, right? So, there is top 5 ability for Joe Burrow, and I think he has a chance to do it. Jermaine Burton and Mike Gesicki should help this offense. You can make the argument that Chase Brown is a better pass catcher than Joe Mixon, who Joe Mixon did catch a lot of footballs, but Chase Brown, Mike Gesicki, Jermaine Burton, T. Higgins, maybe, hopefully, fingers crossed, staying healthy this season on a contract year, right? Like, this offense has the means to blow up. The only caveat that I would say is they did lose. It's who's the guy that went over to the Titans?
Boyd.
No, not Tyler Boyd. Play caller.
Brian Callahan.
Yeah, Brian Callahan. So,
they promoted in-house.
Yes, I know.
We should see a similar
stay the same.
scheme.
Yeah, we gotta hope that's the same. And Zach Taylor, I have no doubt in my mind, will step up and call plays if there tends to be some sort of issue there where they're not gelling with the play calling. They'll get it right. So that's all I have to say on Joe Burrow. Joe Carlton came in here. He said, especially like him in 6-point per pass touchdown leagues. NFFC has that in their scoring format. Super Bowl or bust for Cincy. Yeah, I mean, it's put up or shut up.